really important to see that. I kept, Isabella, my littlest one, was sitting next to me today. I kept, elbowing her. I said, read it again. Look at that Thessalonians passage. What is it that God's calling you to do in your life? So let's open in prayer with that little opening prompt. The Lord be with you. Father, we love you. And Lord, we do excitedly await your return. Lord, allow us not to fall asleep. Allow us not to become drunk on the things of the world, but allow us to stay focused on your work. Lord, we just pray for the blessing, the privilege, the opportunity, Lord, to be open vehicles for you. That, Lord, wherever we go, that we're able to share the good news of Christ. And I pray this in the name of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen. So, everybody's in different places. I had somebody email me this week and say, is it okay if I start your class even though I haven't read a word in the book? And I said, yes, absolutely, right? Because we're trying to just have conversation every week, be able to talk about where God is working and how we can have conversations. Winsome. Remember the word winsome? Winsome conversations with our neighbors. And so we just finished, if you have been reading along, the first half of the book. And the first half of the book, as I said before, is kind of like, here's your shield, Christians, okay? When the world says, how could a loving God let babies die, right? Or how could a loving God allow there to be something called hell, right? You have to be ready. We have to be mature. We've had to spend the time, right, pondering that and thinking that through and praying about it. But now what happens, if you read the intermission, is Keller kind of pivots. And now he says, okay, sort of drop the shield and pick up the sword. He doesn't really say that. But the idea of, okay, now when we're having conversations, great conversations always start with listening, right? Always listening and being empathetic and hearing the pain and the experience of people. But at some point, too, Christ calls us to go on the offensive. Christ calls us to be able to share the good works, the good news that he has. And so that's what happens from here out. The last half of the book, we're going to talk about the truth of the gospel and talk about how we can, again, share that in a very winsome kind of way. But I also thought this is a good time, halfway through, to sort of reset the stage a little bit. Individually, personally. There's one thing, again, to sit and read book after book after book, right? I can give you a list of 100 great apologetic-based books. It's quite another to actually go into the world and put yourself in positions that are awkward and uncomfortable to share the truth. And so as I was praying about it this week, I kind of thought, well, there's kind of three situations. And there's probably more, but in my simple mind, there's three. There are organic relationships. And I would say in terms of being able to evangelize, to be able to share the gospel, sometimes this is the easiest, and sometimes this is the hardest. But these organic relationships mean things that are already there, things that are naturally exist, right? So start in your family. Some of us have had some hard conversation and shed some tears together because you have, in some situations, a spouse that doesn't believe in Christ. Some situations, an ailing mother who looks like she's getting ready to die and she hasn't come to know Jesus, right? Children that are wayward, children that have walked away even though you raised them in church and did everything you could to help them know the truth. Now they've kind of walked away. And it breaks your hearts. And it should. It breaks God's hearts. But you're in the position. God's placed you in that family dynamic to be able to lovingly share that truth over and over again, even when it's rejected. The second one is where we're trying to center a lot of our evangelism and mission efforts right now. And it's the idea of what we call intentional relationships. Okay? In other words, I'm going to plant myself in some space intentionally, and I'm going to build relationships, and I'm going to pray that God will open the door for opportunities to be able to talk about him with those people. Everybody follow me? So again, great example, years we were ministering out in Gadsden County. And so one of the mistakes you see with missions is sometimes we go and we sort of, hey, here's some food, and then we leave. And it's like once a year, and like, wow, Jim, you and I were good guys. One of the things the Lord did in Gadsden County for us is that we went and did a vacation Bible school. And some of you have heard my testimony before, but the Lord ushered particular young men into our lives. And we started playing basketball, and we started eating barbecue, and we started hanging out with them. And it was amazing. And we wanted to continue to go out there, not to have events, but to actually spend time with these new friends. And over the years, many great things happened as a result of that, right? It was an intentional decision. It was basically 6 white guys, some of which could play basketball, some of which could not. But we still went out, right? Over and over and over again, because we knew that the Lord wanted to sort of plant us there in those particular lives. And through that, there was a trust that started to build over time where we were able to have real conversations about real life. Great missions and evangelism is centered in that kind of concept, outside the bubble, as they say. Good things in the bubble, that's the first one, organic relationships. Sometimes the intentional relationship isn't going to Gadsden County, though. So sometimes, and I can't remember who told me this a long time ago, but there was a fella, his hair was always kind of not quite right. You ever have one of those friends, his hair is always just, doesn't look quite right? And the buddies started razzing him. They're like, man, what's wrong, Jim? Like, get a better barber. Well, what Jim did is that Jim very intentionally went and found a barber that didn't know Christ. And he would go 4, 5, 6, 8, 10 times just kind of talking to the person. You're in that chair for 30 minutes, right? 30 minutes talking about lives, asking about kids, etc., and use that as a gospel chair. And he would continue, and he would continue, and he would continue. And sometimes he got bad haircuts, but he got bad haircuts for Christ, So sometimes it's just creative thought, and I know some of you are like, man, when I'm getting my hair cut, I just want to sit and enjoy it. I hate that jibber jabber. But you're going to jibber jabber anyway. Why not jibber jabber for Jesus? You see how that works? And then the third one is passing relationships. These are much, much, much harder. And I think, sometimes the Lord does it, and sometimes the Lord opens these very passing, fleeting moments where you're able to proclaim the gospel. Sitting in an airplane. How many of you have ever sat in the airplane, and maybe you tried, you're like, okay, I'm at least going to open my Bible and sit here and read, and maybe my neighbor will ask me about Jesus, right? Sometimes it's talking to them. It's a 2-hour flight, a 3-hour flight. I can't really leave, but in a winsome way, and talking to them first about their families, etc., but also talking to them about your love for Christ and seeing how they respond, right? That's what we're called to do. It comes in all different contexts, all different environments, all different opportunities. But the idea of Keller's book and other books like it is not a recipe. Do 1, then 2, then 3. It's to make sure that you've really taken time as a Christian to sort of think through, what it is and what the world's objections are to the proclamation of the faith. So I think chapters 8 through 14 will open the door and give us some ideas of ways to start conversations. So this first chapter, chapter 8, is a great one. And he hits some of the really big points. I bet many of you have heard some of these in the past. So the first question, of course, is how did the universe begin? Little question, right? Little question. How did the universe begin? And so people always, of course, now, what's the answer in schools? The Big Bang, right? Work with me, right? The Big Bang kind of thing. And so there was really no God. It was just a cosmic mystery, and boom, suddenly there was a universe, or universes plural, and that's just how it is, right? As a Christian, what do you say to somebody that sort of just digs in and says, well, that's what my teacher told me at school, or my professor told me? This one's not that hard, I don't think, anyway. What do you say? What's the dialogue, right? Yeah, what started it, And they say, well, what banged? What banged? And really, y'all, this is the thing. A lot of these points we're going to get into today, you talk about faith. You talk about having faith. Like a lot of what we see in science and with the scientific world, particularly the atheist-centered science world, it really requires a lot of faith. Wait till we get to fine-tuning in just a minute, right? But the Big Bang Theory. Think about the world as you understand it. Everything in your 40, 50, 70, 80 years of life. Name one thing that did not come from something else. I dare you. I dare you. Right? You can't, because we don't, our minds have never seen or experienced something like that. And so when an atheist says, well, you just have to sort of believe it. Believe what? How in the world can I even get my hands around something like that, right? And, with kids, we taught Bible study to 4th and 5th grade girls, because I have girls for a long time. And so you always do things. And dominoes, many of you have seen that, right? That's a way a child can understand it. But if you set up, 20 dominoes, right? And you say, well, what knocks this one over? This one. What knocks this one over? This one. And you continually go back to the first domino. What knocks it all in place? Your finger. the finger of God. And that's what sets things forth. So that one's one, and frankly, sometimes it seems so simple and sort of like, yeah, but when you have that conversation with somebody, a lot of times where you end up is they'll say, and I've had this a lot, well, maybe, but that doesn't prove the Bible, the God of the Bible. And inside, you don't do this, but inside you're going, yes, yes, because they just gave great ground. Yes, they're at least acknowledging, and they'll say, there may be some higher cosmic, cause that exists. And you're going, yes. Because the Lord just cracked open the door for the proclamation of the gospel. Lots more conversation, lots more dialogue, lots more to go. But deep down, right, that person now is at least acknowledging that it's probably not just chance that we're here. Something greater is there. Another one is the seed in the trees. Again, these simple things, but like, how did this tree come, right? Well, it came from a sapling. How did the sapling come? A seed. How did the seed come? Well, the seed came from another tree. I mean, you just go back. And everything we know in nature, everything we know in science, all flows from something else. And another thing I always think about too, just as a little aside, isn't it interesting how different our job is in the kingdom to cultivate the garden today than it was for Peter and Paul? When Peter and Paul went throughout, they weren't really operating very often in a world of atheists. They were usually operating in an environment where people had not just a God, but gods plural. It was presumed, right? People said, yeah, there's definitely gods, there's definitely higher things, etc. In some ways, they had a competitive edge over what we do today. Because a growing percentage, particularly of the West, particularly of America, are living in this sort of atheist fog, or agnostic fog. And so we have to take the time to work through this step often, right, before we even start to get into some of the biblical beliefs that we have and some of the truths of what Christ does in our lives. Questions or comments about that one? I mean, that's sort of 101, but yet I think it's a fundamental 101. It's a really important conversation to have.
Bill?
Yes, sir.
Well, if you take, the Big Bang and it all came into being somehow that way.
Yep.
But it also came into being in perfect order and symmetry, all the way from the microscopic to the telescope.
That's right. And so I did not set Stan up here. He just planted and pivoted us to the very next point, because that's exactly where we want to go. This next one blows my mind every time I read about it. It should blow your mind every time you read about it, okay? And that is this idea, what he calls the cosmic welcome mat, right? The cosmic welcome mat, or what's known in philosophy and in science as the fine-tuning principle. So, I wish I could even do it justice. I was looking at this yesterday. I was like, how in the world am I even going to convey this? They haven't heard this before. But for the universe to exist the way that it does, for there to be planets or stars, let alone human beings, right? Everything has to be exactly right. And that doesn't even do it justice. So there are these constants, Scientists argue 15 to 20 or 22 like constants, issues like gravity, right? Which I want to talk about. And if all of these constants weren't exactly fine-tuned to the right, precise place, there is no universe, right? There is no universe. So think about like a radio dial, I guess we don't really do that much anymore. Everything's Apple, this and whatever, but like some of us, right? Remember, like you turned the radio, and I'm not even talking about the digital ones. I'm talking about the old manual ones. Remember this? And you had to get it like just right? And then kind of turn your head and open your window a little bit. Maybe it would work. Think about 15 or 20 or 25 dials that all have to get the right radio station. But here's how enormous each dial is. Take gravity. So if you subscribe to the Big Bang Theory, however it was, God created the universe, right? And so when the universe was created, gravity had to be in check. Gravity had to be in line. You follow this? In other words, boom, and it shoots out. Everything shoots out, right? If it shoots out too fast, what happens? Nothing ever forms. It just keeps going. So mass never comes together to create anything. The opposite, though, is if gravity is too heavy, what would happen? Boom, and then whoop, it all come back together. Which would be like one giant, right? I don't know, plant. I think it just combusts. I'm not a physicist, but that's what I understand from my junior in high school who studies physics. Here's the dial, everybody, on just this one area. And that is that it has to be 1/1000th of a gram correct. So think about a dial that has 1 billion numbers on it, okay? And that is in check by 1 gram, not 1 pound, not 1 ton, and that's where it has to be. And this is, by the way, this isn't some, Christian out there who, came up with this idea. I mean, this is established. Look it up. Look at Hawkins, right? Hawkins. Look at the guys that really deny God. Read their stuff. And everybody says it's correct. That these radio dials all have to be on this precise point, right? 1 billion points, and it's actually more than that because you got to figure out the weight of it all. But it has to be just here. And that has to be true how many times? 15 or 20 or 25 times for there to be life. And it's crazy. And so what's sort of the explanation? So if you talk to an atheist scientist, right? Dawkins is the one that sort of, I think, initiated this idea. It's very popular now. If you like science fiction, by the way, you see a lot of it. The idea of the multiverse, okay? In other words, there's like a machine out there somewhere, okay? It just starts pumping out, not hundreds, not thousands, not millions, but billions and billions and billions and billions of universes that are all out there. But the good news, everybody, is you hit the lottery. Because that's how many billions and billions and billions, probably trillions of universes, and you just happen to be born in the right one, in the right place, at the right time. And again, you think about that for just a minute. There's no proof that there's a second universe. There's no evidence whatsoever that there's a second universe, yet alone billions and billions of them. Which one takes a greater leap of faith, right? The idea that there is a designer that created our world, that created our place, that created you and me specifically, right, because he loves us. Or subscribing to a sci-fi concept that there are billions and billions of universes, a multiverse that exists. Those of you who read the book, it's fun to have, I think, little examples. I wasn't familiar with the poker one. Did you all read that? He said, I think the guy's name is Platinga, but it's the idea of, you're dealing the cards, in an old saloon. And 20 straight hands in a row, right, you happen to get 4 aces every time. Right? And the guys all pull the gun and getting ready to shoot you. And you go, no. It's just that we happen to be in the right place in billions and billions of universes. This has happened. Of course not. Of course the guy's cheating. Right? Those are the kind of examples that are practical and helpful in the way that it works. Any questions or thoughts on that one? That is really, really good to know. I mean, you talk about something that just gives you strength yourself. It gives you something to talk about with your kids, talk about with other people outside of our faith. Really important. Cool. Yes, sir.
I've read a lot of astronomy. I've been interested. I thought about being an astronomer early on in life.
Yeah.
I've read a lot about physics.
Yeah.
And everything I read just points more and more to the creation of the universe by God. It didn't happen just spontaneously.
And by the way, that's why I love being in here. I mean, I love smart people. I'm not smart, but I like to surround myself with smart people. And every time that we talked to the Christian doctor about 3 weeks ago, and he was sharing, right? Lewis just shared sort of his study. It's amazing, right? It's amazing. And again, I have a daughter who's getting ready to go off to college. Some of you have had kids that have gone to college, etc. We have to equip them. Our children have to understand how to ask hard questions, because otherwise, everybody sort of, it's a group think, and everybody sort of subscribes to this atheism and this new way, etc. We're smart. God's smartest, but he equips us to be able to study these things and talk about them openly with our children. Hand in hand with that is this idea of the regularity of nature. And so, the example he uses in the book is that, water boils at a certain condition. Everybody knows that. Ever since man has recorded it, water has boiled under certain conditions, right? And so when you have things like that, not only is the design perfect, as he writes, but science and inductive reasoning rely upon the regularity of nature to experiment and draw conclusions. In other words, there are these rules, right? That's what science is. Some of you are scientists, right? When you do experiments, you're banking on a whole number of things to be true. Well, where does that come from? In other words, if everything is just pure random and chance and all the rest, why does it seem so often that there are rules and there's this given structure, this design? There's this unbelievable design that somehow just happens to be. You can't explain that, right? Well, we just got lucky. I mean, kind of at the end of the day, I'm a simple guy. Like, that's kind of where you end up with all these. Well, we're just lucky. We're just lucky. We're just lucky. Too many coincidences, right? Start to make you scratch your head a little bit more. And then what he does is he takes that idea of science and he pivots a little bit. And he talks about beauty. Everybody raise your hand because I know it's true. How many of you, though, repeatedly in life have found an intimacy with God through nature? Through art, through music, right? I bet everybody in here has some place or something that just brings you in this inexplainable way to the throne room of God, right? Something that is artistic, something that is natural. And so what do scientists say when you start talking about that? By the way, I don't want to say scientists. What do atheists say? Because I am very pro-science, right? We don't want to do that stuff. But what do atheists say when we start talking about the beauty argument? They say, well, actually, that's just evolutionary. You see, because when you look at the water, how many of you like the beach? Many of you love the beach, right? When you see water, well, you're drawn and you feel at peace because of what? Millions of years or hundreds of thousands of years of evolution, and the water just is nourishment, and mankind has to have water, and therefore that's the only reason you really like it. You don't realize that. It's really not beautiful at all. It's simply that you're thirsty deep down, and that's why it's so good. Or why things that are green and lush, right? Well, it's just food. Likelihood is that's where probably there's food. Well, how do you respond to that one? But what he says, Keller says, is it's kind of interesting, right? Because when you start looking at it in a larger scale, scientists are right at some level. If you're hungry right now, Lewis, right? Probably getting there. What happens is you're going to go and find food. But the fact that he has hunger at all, right, causes him to know that there is such a thing as food. True? This is a PG class, but sexual interest, right? When men or women have urges, right? What do we know can happen? Intimacy, right? In other words, that urge is pulling them toward something that does exist. Everybody follow along, head shakes? And we can go through a whole litany of different things where that's true. But that's the important piece. And so the issue of that people in the world, ever since things have been recorded, have believed in God, right? That same logic would seem to hold true. The idea that we all hunger for something far greater than us, that we hold on to the fact that there is a God, there is a creator, etc. I don't know if this is the strongest argument in the world, but the idea is that there must be a God because of that continual desire, that vacuum, in all different contexts. So he kind of turns it around a little bit on them with that piece. But then he continues, and he really goes after the atheists, right, the evolutionary biologists. And he says, well, if we can't trust our belief-forming faculties to tell us the truth about God, why would we trust them to tell us the truth about anything, including evolutionary science? If our cognitive faculties only tell us what we need to survive, not what is true, why trust them about anything at all? In other words, you follow that idea? The idea that, like, these atheists, right, want to say, well, we have figured it all out over here, and we know, like, what objective truth looks like and how things operate. But yet, when you all try to say that or look at it, it falls apart because you don't have the cognitive ability. There is no ability. You're basically only acting on need, right? Physical and physiological needs. And so you have no way to actually construct what's going on. But we have it figured out. And what Keller says is, that's foolishness. That can't be. It implodes upon itself. You see, if we believe that in God, the universe gives us the ability to believe that our cognitive faculties actually do work. God allows us to form true beliefs and knowledge when we talk about the Big Bang, right? The idea that everything we've known our whole lives show that something started something, that started something, and so on and so forth. We comprehend that, right? We're able to comprehend it. The idea of fine-tuning, that everyone now, the more revelation we have in science, points to the fact that everything has to be just so. And if it's one tick, 1/1000th of a gram off, there is no universe. There is no mankind. We have the cognitive ability, under your own argument, scientists, atheist scientists, to understand that, right? The idea of nature, the clues of beauty. When you look at all of these things, which case is more convincing, right? It's that there is indeed a God that made us for his enjoyment. So, if any of this interests you at all, or some of this is confusing at all, which it probably is, I want to recommend to you a really fantastic series of short videos. And I like cartoons. I've always liked cartoons. They're animated, and they're very easy to follow. But they're called the Reasonable Faith animated videos, and they're available free on YouTube. I gave you the link there. Just for fun today, if you're sitting at home and you're bored, look at that fine-tuning one. Look at that cartoon. If you've been having a conversation with somebody and they've been wrestling with the idea of God or no God, it all depends on who they are. Sometimes they're heart people, sometimes they're mind people. The mind people, I think, would respond very well to these videos. And again, you don't just say, here's the answer, but hey, let's watch this together and talk about it. It's great. My daughter Kate and I, she watched it, and we had a conversation yesterday for 30 or 40 minutes, and she was telling me lots of things about physics that I didn't even know, right? But we ended in the same place, right? The idea of a multiverse and billions and billions of universe takes a much greater leap of faith, right, than what we see here and what we know now. Almost out of time. A couple things I want to bring to everybody's attention. We're working as hard as we know how to work to really ramp up evangelism and missions, especially as we enter into the new year. We have our very next opportunity to do things will be on December 5th. I didn't even tell Kimberly this yet, but we're going to have two different things that we'd like to do. One is that we want to go back and do prayer walks in the 4 neighborhoods around our church. And we're going to go ahead and buy about 100 poinsettias. And every prayer team will have 25 poinsettias at their disposal. And it's just a little blessing, and to walk through neighborhoods and just to ask how we can pray for people and to be sharing the good news of Jesus and the love of Christ. And so I really want to encourage y'all. It's 2 hours on a Saturday morning. That's all it is. Or we also have an amazing new partner over in Quincy, one of my favorite places, a guy by the name of Pastor Charles Salem. And we did Feeding the 5,000 last month. They have another big truck of food, enough to feed 1,400 people, and it's going to be a drive-through. Some of you participated last time. It's really easy, very safe, and everybody's COVID sensitive right now. Another wonderful thing to bring, if you have kids, et cetera, it's a great thing to bring kids to. It's about a 2-hour event, 30-minute drive there, 30-minute drive back, so maybe it's a 3-hour commitment. I'd love to see everybody in this class, if you're available on that day. I know it's a busy time of year, but it's a great way to remind yourselves what Advent is all about. December 5th. Both on December 5th, we're going to divide, conquer. Let me know if you're interested. Let Kimberly know, and we'll get you all set up with that. You'll hear more about this, but a new twist on the Advent tree. We're actually going to have 2 trees because I think we need to start changing our mindset at St. Peter's from just giving money and giving things to actually saying, I'm going to give my time and my talents. And so we're going to challenge everybody this year to take 2 ornaments. One, to give something, to buy diapers, to help a kid with a toy for Christmas. But the other is to say, you know what, I'll go on a prayer walk. You know what, I'll commit to a day of prayer and fasting. You know what, whatever it might be. So just be prepared, tell others, encourage others. We're actually going to probably do them in the back here, and there'll be plenty of ornaments. We spent a lot of time this week working on that. And last thing is Life Core Ministry. So we're creating 8 different cores for evangelism and missions. One of them is Life Ministry. We have a great partnership with the Phi Center and the Women's Pregnancy Center. And we have about probably 15 or 20 opportunities for people to commit to going and spending some time there, ranging from everything from just stocking shelves, if that's kind of your thing, the whole way to crisis counseling, where you can actually sit down with a woman in crisis thinking about having an abortion or giving her baby up, and everything in between. In other words, it can be something that everybody takes part in, and their schedules are very flexible as to how they can have it. So if you're interested in a life ministry, we're trying really hard to fill all those volunteer slots in the next month or two. So that's a lot, but I'm excited about what's going on. I'm excited about you all being here and what the Lord's doing to open up his kingdom. So thank you guys, and we'll see you next time.